What evil prank have you pulled off? I remember it like it was yesterday. At summer camp, my cabin's leaders found a little snake that wasn't doing so well, so they decided to put it in an old terrarium in our cabin. A few of the guys were nervous about it. So the next day, when the leaders decided the snake was well enough to release, I asked that they keep quiet about releasing it. When the other guys got back to the cabin and found no snake in the terrarium, chaos ensued. I lived in Korea for a bit. When my mom came to visit, I told my Korean girlfriend it was an American custom to greet older women by touching elbows. I told my mom the same story about Korean customs. It was a thing of beauty. They were not pleased. One night I replaced every framed object in my boss's office with a picture of me making a stern face. Posters, certificates, photos, etc. Took like 3 hours because he had like 30 framed things in his office. The next day I made sure I was out doing field work to make him sit with it most of the day. He had a lot of foot traffic to look at his office that day. One that was played on me. I took my SATs, college entrance exams, for those outside the US, on April 1st. Should have known, right? But apparently, I'm not that smart. That night I went out with a group of friends, and when I got home my mom met me with a serious look on her face. She told me that the testing committee had called, that there had been an error and all test papers from that day were lost. Everyone was being contacted to schedule a date to retake the exam. She totally sold it. Face, reactions, everything. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And she let me believe it until lunchtime the next day. My mom is a diabolical person. Over a decade ago I worked in the warehouse of a guitar center. We dealt with inventory, shipping and receiving. We had a dumpster behind the store in a shared parking lot that people would leave random things in even though it was not a public dumpster. One day we found a broken beach chair in an open cardboard box. The box had a shipping label on it. It was left in such a way that it was easy to assume that the chair/box combo was left by the same person. We packed the beach chair in another box and shipped it back to the customer. I wish I was there to see the person's face when they received their trash back via UPS. Early days of networked PCs. DOS and NetWare. I worked in a computer lab on campus. There weren't a lot of management utilities available at the time, so I, and a few other student employees, wrote batch scripts and small programs to automate a few things when a student or professor would log on to the network. Having that sort of access led to numerous pranks being pulled, but most of us were savvy enough to figure it out and undo the prank. However, we had two co-workers who liked to loaf a bit too much for our liking. They were not at all technical and had taken the lab assistant job because they thought it was easy money. They had conspired to be assigned to a remote classroom lab, that rarely had any students in it who would need assistance, for most of their working hours. They would just sit around and play games on the PCs while the rest of us were, working. Clearly this could not stand. I rewrote a piece of code that was executed when every single user signed on. If the username was either one of these two and they were signing in on a PC in that remote classroom and it was during their working hours, it would look at an innocuous file on the network. The file merely had a few bytes in it which noted how long it had been since this prank had last been triggered, ensuring that it would run once or twice a week maximum. If it did activate, it would launch a terminate and stay resident program which would wait a random time, between 5 to 15 minutes, and then drop an image of two dudes 69ing on the monitor for a few seconds and reboot the PC. Tested it. Put the compiled program in place and deleted the source. Much hilarity ensued for the next 2 semesters. Working in a hot factory, supervisor and job planner in this enclosed cubicle with a window AC unit in the middle of the shop, aka nice 68 * in there while we sweat our ass off in 95-110 F heat. Kinda hot and pissy and always flies around. I kept grabbing the flies alive, walking into the cubicle to ask a usually legit question or say I'm just cooling off and opening my hand behind my back. I put 14 of those fuckers in there in one shift. He never did catch on I was doing it, and the planner was pissed sweating around. There were so many flies in there. Supervisor was cleaning out every crevice thinking some food is supporting life now somewhere. Dude was harassing my ex because he used to have her cell phone number. Was being a real fucking creep. Anyways, I created an email address, signed up to Kijiji and placed an ad offering an 83D TV for free with some excuse about a bad breakup and not wanting her to get it. I asked people to only text or call. I then went to bed and forgot all about it until the next day at work. I get a text from my ex asking if I had done something on Kijiji. The dude was begging her to take the ad down and apologizing. I checked the email and there were 5 pages of responses even though I had told them not to email but to call or text. Dude's phone must have been ringing constantly. I took the ad down and she never heard from him again. I got pranked. Does that count? Was at a house party at my then girlfriend's place. She knew me really well and knew that I've got a fairly competitive spirit. The place is really dark. She turns to me in the dim light and says, "My name, I bet you can't fit an orange in your mouth and eat it all in one bite." Wasn't about to say no to a challenge, so I took her up on it, only it wasn't an orange that she'd peeled but a lemon. One summer in college, I worked in the registrar's office, registering all the incoming freshmen. A prof who was a mentor to me was teaching freshman seminar and asked me to handpick a class for her. Straight A students, high sats, whatever. So I did. 15 students, all named Sarah. I used to work at a science tutoring center when I was in college and my gap year before professional school. One of the things we taught very often was anatomy. So naturally we acquired a few skeletons and various skulls with some variation in how they looked or were marked, etc. Well, I was closing one night, and I knew my coworker was opening the next morning early, so before I locked up I assorted all of the skeletons and skulls in a welcome party near the front door. I had one immediately at the opening of the only door into the room with several backup skeletons and skulls just behind at a table together watching on. The best part was that you have to turn on the lights manually and that switch is immediately to the side of the door opening, so when she reached down to turn on the lights she had to come face to face with some lifeless skeleton skull in the middle of the shady opening. Needless to say she screamed, and it was loud enough to make our boss come to see if she was okay. Woke up to some colorful texts LMAO. Still proud of that one honestly. Back in middle school, my best friend and me sent an email to a newspaper claiming to be a famous person, stating we would be running in the upcoming presidential election, and that they'd hear the details shortly. The next day, all the main newspapers over here printed it and some started speculating about the strategy, until it was all officially denied. At which point the person and their company started speculating themselves about who and why would plan such a story, unaware it was just 2 kids who accidentally found a spoof emailing app in the iPhone jailbroken app store. I farted under the covers, then pointed at the ceiling above my GF and shouted "Spider." So she'd throw the blankets over her head. Later when she told her parents, that turned out to be the thing that earned her dad's respect for me. Made him laugh so hard he needed an inhaler. 2 of my friends have never met each other. Before they spoke I told both of them that the other is a bit deaf. They shouted at each other for a few minutes before they realized that I'm an asshole. I made fake versions of Internet Explorer that turn your PC off when started in the ICT class at school. Once I asked a friend for another friend's phone number. He gave me a teacher's number. I then went on to send multiple messages in a fake angry tone to my unsuspecting teacher. Fuck that diabolical genius of a friend. A friend kept trying to steal my sushi off my plate at a sushi restaurant. So while she wasn't looking I stuffed it full of wasabi, put a bit of fish back on top to cover my tracks, and pretended to not be looking when she started reaching towards it. She tossed it into her mouth, started chewing down, and I just swung my head towards her to say "You fucked up." 5 minutes of coughing, muffled screaming, and copious amounts of water later, she had learned her lesson. I created a fake uniform policy poster for my high school. It wasn't perfect, but people were idiots, so they fell for it. It took everyone about a week to actually read the poster and see that it was obviously fake. Some people still showed up on the first day wearing the uniform that I designed. Edit: the uniform wasn't anything idiotic looking. Just khaki pants, white button shirt, church shoes, and black socks. The outrage was mostly from the fact that people couldn't wear their name brand clothes as a flex. Kept both regular and Honey Nut Cheerios at the house because my mom and my dad each ate one type and hated the other. Unless you look close, they appear the same, so one day I switched the boxes. The looks were priceless. The AM supervisor at my office is a short little man who likes to work from a laptop on a rolling adjustable desk. For over a year I gradually raised the height of this desk and watched as he went from sitting on a stool, to an adjustable tall task chair, to standing. Last week he removed the wheels from the desk to lower the height. He doesn't realize it's adjustable. Bought a new TV after saving up for a couple months. Next day I played a video on the TV to make it look like it fell and was broken/cracked, and my housemates all individually fell for it. Delighted with myself. Welded a coworker's boot to the floor. He had worn out the toe caps on his steel-toed boots. While he was making a weld kneeling inside a large piece of equipment, on steel, I put a small tack weld on his boot so he had trouble breaking it loose and getting up. My dad said that he and his mates picked up their very drunk passed out friend with the chair he was on. Put it in the back of a ute, drove him to the middle of nowhere and left him there, chair and all. I put hot sauce on my little brother's toothpaste one morning when we were kids. He apparently thought he was being poisoned. Flipped the lights on and off while my sister and friends played with a Ouija board. Hasn't quite been the same since. In high school I went into the boys' bathroom and replaced all the soap in the dispensers with pancake syrup. My brother used my Netflix and I made his profile a kids account. He likes kids shows and movies, so he went 2 weeks without noticing. I waited a month or so and randomly changed it again. My timing was impeccable. He was watching The Punisher. I got a Harry Potter calligraphy set for my birthday years ago. It had Hogwarts marked paper, envelopes, and everything. My brother ate all of my birthday chocolates from an ant that night, so I plotted my revenge. Next September I copied out Harry's letter word for word in green ink, only changing the name. I let him believe he was going to magic school for 2 whole weeks before I crushed it. At my sister's swim meet, I found an ice machine tucked away in a garage-looking thing. So I started collecting the ice and somehow managed to put ice in nearly everyone's shoe at the meet. It was a wild, beautiful moment of pure confusion and chaos. Everyone started freaking out and no one knew it was the little shy girl who secretly enjoyed turmoil. I saw a post about switching around mayo and vanilla pudding, emptied out a mayo jar and cleaned it well, filled it with a few pots worth of vanilla pudding and took it to uni. Our uni is very lax about eating during the lectures, so I waited until midday when I was sitting in the middle of all my friends and they were all eating their lunch. Cue me taking out the jar of mayo and a spoon, popping the lid and taking a big ol' spoonful with a grin. At first only the closest ones noticed, but after the 3rd spoon it was like everyone was frozen around me. Pin drop silence. After the 5th spoon someone faux-retched and the spell was broken. The looks of sheer terror and disgust was well worth the pain of eating vanilla pudding. I'm a chocolate kinda gal. I convinced a co-worker for 2 months that the guy she had sat next to for 3 years was named Jay, not Dave. They worked in different departments but sat 3 feet away from each other for years. I got the guy in on it. And his manager. Then later his supervisor, group manager, division manager, and entire department. They bought him new nameplates for his desk, changed stuff in the system, so his name would print as J, etc. The only thing they didn't change was his phone number and email. She thought she was going crazy, and when I finally told her, she sucker punched me in the stomach and dropped me to my knees. She was a personal trainer in her off hours, so she got me good. Totally worth it, and I laugh about it to this day over a decade later. Not a prank I pulled off, but one I was victim to. My manager had left me in charge of the store when I was 16, not legal but that's a whole other mess, for a whole weekend. Saturday went well and I was happy with how I went, although my paranoid brain is always concerned about whether or not doors are actually locked. I'm the same with my house, but the store was worse. So I make my dad drive down to the store to double check that everything is okay. 15 minutes later I get a phone call from him saying manager and the police are here because the door was unlocked and people were inside. Cue to me on the floor in tears hyperventilating, while my dad is telling my mom, who had since picked up the phone, that he was only kidding and that everything was fine. Let rip a silent fart and asked my mom if she could smell popcorn. She took a few good sniffs before it hit her. Not me but my cat. That fucker took a huge shit on my pillow next to me while I was asleep. I stuck a pocket pussy on a doorknob at my friend's house, front door, rang the doorbell and booked it. I was 14. In the break room, called my coworker in. I had a chair, plastic cup with an inch of water in it, and a broom in the corner. I asked him to help me stick the cup on the ceiling, climbed on the chair, and he held the cup up with the broom. Then I said wanna see a cool trick, climbed off the chair and walked away with it. You could hear him cussing and yelling out in the parking lot. Out with my flatmates at the pub, one had brought a bunch of mates with him and they were being quite loud whereas I prefer a quieter meeting. Still, I was a bit tipsy too. So, I filled one of the spare shot glasses on the table with vinegar. I assumed when I passed it to him he'd smell it and realize. Nope, he downed that shit, then coughed and spat it back into the glass. Soaked my brother's entire sock collection with water. People in school used to always take my Gatorade. So I took an empty bottle, filled it with dyed salt water, and let them take my drink. Not gonna lie, it was hilarious watching one person to spit salt water in the middle of class only for their unbelieving friend to do the same. Whenever I was playing hide and seek, I'd place stuffed animals in certain locations, such as under the covers on a bed, to make it look like a child was hiding there. I made sure to always hide nearby so I could see or hear the other kids' reaction when they pulled up the covers to see a pile of stuffed animals. It was so funny. I went to a party at someone's house whom I didn't like. First thing I did was go into the bathroom and turn their toilet paper around so the roll was on backwards. Everyone who went to the bathroom there saw what kind of Neanderthals the homeowners were. I can meow just like a cat. In fact, I can do it so well that people will often look around for the cat that is not there. This has resulted in several hilarious instances of strangers running around frantically looking for the cat and me sitting off to the side watching. Stray cats will usually stare at me for a couple seconds before continuing doing whatever. Pet cats will usually hold a conversation with me, particularly if they're chatty. Edit. The confusion of everyone's pets fuels the Lady of Cats and she is pleased by your offerings of Reddit awards. I put a black tip on my thumb with a rubber band and made my little brother think I cut off the circulation, got my entire family in on it. One of them was just calmly eating cheese balls in the corner while my little brother yelled at him to call the police. Left a message for an investigator that I worked with to call Elephant about a crucial piece of evidence for one of his tough cases. The number I left was for the Toledo Zoo administration offices. The receptionist played along for a few minutes and then let him down easy. The best part is he called on speakerphone from the chief's office. At my high school senior class picnic way back in the late 80s, I spread a rumor that the brownies I brought were pot brownies. Half a dozen kids went to the nurse because they were so stoned. My girlfriend and I went to a candle store. I had eaten 3 helpings of chili the night before and had bad chili burps. I grabbed one of the candles with a sealable lid, burped into it, and handed it to her to smell, opening the lid right before she leaned in to smell. She looked extremely confused and then turned to me and said, "Did you burp into this?" Husband dislikes ranch. Hates it. Loathes it. I put ranch on everything. Ranch in dips, ranch seasoning on vegetables. Ranch. It's my long con. One day he will mess up big time. Oh yeah? Well, I been feeding you ranch for years. Edit, curse you all for making me add an edit. It's a prank and a joke. I love my husband. We are perfect for one another. We can play harmless jokes on one another and not get divorced. He can read this whole thread anytime he would like. Please take it in the spirit of the thread, and stop trying to be my psychiatrist. I was in a bakery with my mom and my 1-year-old daughter. I farted and it was one of those silent but deadly ones, so I said, "Oh my God, Mom, seriously?" Her eyes got really wide and she was like, "It wasn't me. Must have been the baby." I kept harassing her about farting and blaming the baby for the rest of the day. Then she actually farted and I said, "Are you gonna blame that one on the baby too?" She said, "No, that was definitely me." And I laughed and told her the first one was me. She just about lost it laughing. My friend from Palestine was in love with a Danish girl. We all lived together abroad with another Danish-speaking guy. For 6 months me and my Danish-speaking friend would greet each other by saying "shout up" in Danish. It worked perfectly. Our friend traveled to Denmark telling the whole girl's family to shout up, leaving them all very confused and him very mad.